It's no fault of Elvis, he loved the song.
American Dolly Parton's cherished country music star and sweetie icon has charmed the public for decades. World using her heart and voice, but what if you knew that behind that brilliant a trail of stress and treachery lies behind a grin? Some well-known conflicts that never made the headlines, and they grinned on camera. Publicly commended her, yet behind the scenes with bitterly slammed doors one singer's comments and strained friendships declared they will never again collaborate with her. Someone attempted to take her biggest hit. And despite her efforts to keep it, the 5 singers are now revealed to us. Dolly found it unbearable to work with, but what actually transpired behind closed doors? How come some of those old wounds are still open today? When you learn about it, the fact that Dolly Parton will never be seen similarly to Dolly Parton's travel to fame, you may recognize her from her large hair. That voice and the dazzling attire. Angels might weep over that, but behind Dolly Parton's scenes have a backstory that's more astounding than you might imagine. Her path from impoverished origins to music royalty will go down in history. Many people are unaware of how crowded it is. With a great deal of drama, as she is known as, there are some people who are the queen of kindness. Names that she's had in the industry some fierce conflict with, but to recognize the person with whom Dolly disagreed, must first comprehend her and the reasons behind it. She avoids getting caught up in drama. January marked the birth of Dolly Rebecca Parton. January 19, 1946, at a little one-room hut in her upbringing took place in Locust Ridge, Tennessee. A devoted but troubled family with 12 children packed into a little mountain house. Lee Parton, her father, was a diligent worker. A construction worker and farmer who was unable to either read or write, but according to Dolly, he was her mother. I was the smartest man she had ever met. Before turning 35, Lee had 12 children. And she undoubtedly passed on her profound love of God, music, and storytelling. Dolly, but she didn't consider music to be a pastime. The Partons had no means of survival. Funds for entertainment, so the children learnt to harmonize and sing in church. Dolly's family saw her on the porch speech at a young age, and by the time she was 10 she was doing a show on the local radio station and TV programs in Knoxville, which is nearby, and it's shortly after she started performing. The day following her, at the Grand Ole Opry, she packed after graduating from high school in 1964. Packed a backpack and left for Nashville without cash or relationships, only unadulterated talent and aspirations greater than what she left behind in the Smoky Mountains behind, and she began by penning music for other people, but she wasn't always wished to pursue a career in songwriting. She desired the spotlight, and she received it initially. Dumb was a country hit in 1967. Blonde is a witty little tune that essentially informed everyone that she wasn't just an educated but attractive face. But how did she go from a newcomer to Nashville to a worldwide icon? It all started when she signed up. Porter Wagoner's performance in Everything changed in 1967, and millions of people witnessed weekly appearances on television. Her duets with people loved Porter right away. Their harmony, synergy, and Dolly's captivating demeanor, and by this she began her solo career in the early 1970s. Jolene entered, and nobody was able to stop her. 1973 and turned into a hymn, followed by I Will Always Love You, a worldwide hit, and yeah, just in case you were wondering. The version by Whitney Houston came much subsequently and transformed it into one of the greatest songs ever, but Dolly still has the rights to the millions she earned. Not boasting, even from that one song. By the 1980s, Dolly was aware of in movies, music, and merchandise, you identify it. She co-starred with Lily Tomlin, and Jane Fonda demonstrated she could act in addition to being a singer. Additionally, Dollywood arrived with her own theme park that first opened its doors in 1986, Tennessee's Pigeon Forge. While other celebrities we bought yachts, and Dolly started a family. The local amusement park to increase the regional economy, but avoid allowing the "don't let the kindness deceive you." Dolly's one among the most intelligent businesswomen, and she has authored thousands of showbiz songs, won numerous Grammy Awards and awards for lifetime achievement, and has been admitted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not all fame is awful for a girl who had growing up without running water, but that's not only that, but she has also donated millions. Countless books via her mental library, an initiative that ensures children have availability of books wherever they live. Dolly has constructed this throughout the years. Appearance of being kind, modest, and superior. Even a Southern angel has drama. Her boundaries, and during the years, a few names have repeatedly appeared. She had disagreements with those who undervalued her, folks who believed they may take credit or exert control over her. For her brilliance, and Dolly, of course, remembers that even though she could be grinning, there have been disputes behind the scenes. Stress and wounded sentiments, she's never forgotten. Among the first and possibly the most challenging was with a man who assisted in starting her career before attempting to possess it, and you'll be amazed at how this a business alliance became one of the nation's messiest splits. Dolly Parton versus Porter. In music. Before Dolly, Wagner was a worldwide celebrity. Porter Wagner was well known already, and he established himself in the country music industry. With a voice that could cut through in any heart, he wasn't merely he was a showman in addition to being a vocalist, and he had his own television program in the 1960s called one of the shows is The Porter Wagner Show. Largest country music shows that are syndicated. His stage persona was flamboyant in America. However, he was astute behind the scenes. A businessman with a strong sense of tradition, he saw something and recognized what sold. Something unique about Dolly Parton when Dolly Parton replaced Porter on his performance. Norma Jean, his former female vocalist. For those who loved Norma, the exchange was initially jeered by others. Some even wrote Dolly furious on stage. Porter insisted on keeping the letters, but she and Dolly remained composed and polite. And resolute, since she had a point to demonstrate, and it was quick, for their harmonies will make them a successful duo. Were electrical, and the chemistry between them was together. They scored over 100 points. A dozen songs from the top 10 hits, and on camera they appeared to be the ideal group, but tension was building behind the smiles. The thing that Porter Wagner didn't do: simply want to join Dolly in singing. Allegedly desired to dominate her profession. He controlled her looks and made the decision. Songs that they would record and have the last say on the majority of corporate choices, but Dolly was more than simply a pretty-faced singer. She was a thinker, songwriter, and a woman who has her own vision, ambition that went well beyond the duet she performed on recordings and in TV guest roles. Yet the more well-known she grew, more determined to stand on her own. She was quickly becoming irritated. And she started penning songs that weren't fit her desired Porter and Dolly mold. Freedom of expression and, more significantly, authority over her own speech. She thereafter acknowledged that Porter had a difficult period. Considering her to be his equal in that he had initially provided her with a platform. However, years later, the identical platform had turned into a cage, yet she remained there. She immediately realized how much she owed him. However, by the tension in 1973 was intolerable, and she departed. The Porter Wagner displays it to the whole public. Appeared friendly but was behind locked doors. That was only the first 5 years. Porter returned after she left. Swinging with attorneys, he filed a lawsuit in 1979. Dolly for $3 million with the assertion that she would breach their agreement. He claimed she owed him for management fees and expenditures and a portion of her earnings since departing. Dolly was astounded by the show. Porter has always been regarded as a mentor. Despite this time, they didn't split ways amicably. Felt like a betrayal, the lawsuit when things became ugly. There were public remarks, media attention, and the industry whispers, but Dolly refrained from dragging him. Instead, she moved silently through the mud. Resolved the matter outside of court. She subsequently talked about her desire to avoid conflict, but simply desired freedom instead. Of the entire thing affected Dolly. Porter had meant something to me emotionally. He had been present at the time of the initially, they had created history together. However, he was unable to release her without in an interview, she once stated, "Fight." As I attempted to exit the performance, I told Porter that I would stay for 5 years, and it had 5 years old, and it was 6 years old. At 7, he was simply having a really difficult time since it was going to interfere with his demonstrate how tied and bound we were. In a variety of emotional ways together, and he simply refused to hear it. According to the statement, their feud it was much more than just money. And this exposed a disfiguring aspect of Dolly had never seen Porter before. And it is said that this caused her great pain, yet the good news is that, as usual, time alters the situation. By the late 1980s, following after years of animosity, Porter and in 2002, Dolly had resumed her conversation. Dolly took a really unexpected action. Porter Wagner was among the people she inducted into the Hall of Fame for country music. On stage, she expressed to the crowd how much he meaningful to her despite their difficult. When Porter was admitted to the hospital, Dolly had lung cancer in 2007. Allegedly paid him a visit a few weeks later. Dolly was devastated when Porter passed away. She performed at Dollywood in a tribute show. Not for the headlines, not for the public, but for the man who assisted in her launch, even if he made an effort to suppress his dreams. Returning, this encounter with Porter is unquestionably among the most intricate Dolly's career, including one that influenced her in ways that few people are aware of. However, this next individual on Dolly's list stated something that startled not just Dolly, but the whole universe, comparing Dolly Parton and Linda. They were the ideal team. 3. Ronstadt. Dolly is one of the powerful women in country music. Linda Ronstadt, Emmylou Harris, and Parton, who joined forces to work together on the trio's vocals on the iconic album, mixed flawlessly, creating smashes that continue to chill us, yet behind the moments that weren't all sunny and singing alongs, particularly those between Dolly and Linda and the original musical sisterhood, almost descended into an intense conflict in the middle of the 1970s. Emmylou and Dolly. Linda were already revered stars in their own right. Each other's efforts and fantasized about working together, yet with opposing schedules and the politics of record labels they kept delaying their plans. Not until 1987 did they release their debut album. Trio, the record, was finally released. Was a huge success, reaching platinum and topping the earned a Grammy and even made it to the country charts. However, even if the music was in harmony, sessions of recording were anything but. Dolly is renowned for her speedy work ethic, favored to perform songs flawlessly in one or however. After 2 takes, Linda was a perfectionist, frequently dedicates hours to Emmylou, get one vocal just right. Was the mediator's goal to maintain the peace. Dolly once disclosed that labor it was like dealing with a diva. With Linda, who enjoys working and living in the studio slowly, she even mentioned wanting to shout at Linda so many times that it became so awful that everyone could see it. Because their methods of operation conflicted and there were simmering tensions beneath the surface. In spite of the difficulties, the 1994 saw their attempt at a second album, which they Trio 2 was recorded, but there are label problems and its release was delayed due to scheduling problems. Fortunately, The CD eventually featured the daylight in. However, by 1999, it was too late because the damage to their partnership was completed. Although the friendship between Dolly and Linda might begin with respect for one another and there is undoubtedly some friendly competition, didn't actually finish on the best of terms. Linda was really outspoken about her annoyance with Dolly's lack of dependability regarding the project. Linda once said in an interview that it was difficult to trust her during the recording sessions. She asserted Dolly would frequently show up or cancel plans up late, which really irritated her. In fact, that she previously stated Dolly was never punctual and that she was constantly a bit flaky, but it went beyond simply being. It was evident to tardy Linda that she felt Dolly didn't follow the procedure exactly, or dedication required to finish the. According to Project Linda, Dolly was more focused on her individual career than the teamwork, and it left a sour aftertaste between them. That conflict between the two was sufficient to result in some severe friction, as Linda actually stated that she didn't intend to work. Linda admitted to Dolly once more that she believed Dolly's absence of professionalism has ruined what was intended to be a happy working together during class time. Help some injuries because years later, in spite of everything, the animosity that Linda and Dolly would display indications of reconciliation, but they weren't without its embarrassing moments. It's evident that both women most likely still harbored resentment, and although they're not overtly antagonistic to one another, you shouldn't really try to rekindle their camaraderie. So as the three legacy endured, and admirers rejoiced their storied partnership, Linda's Dolly's ears continued to ring with the words, giving her mouth a bad taste. Elvis Presley comes to mind when you think about Presley. The king of rock and roll comes to mind. Cultural figure who transformed the appearance of music indefinitely, followed by Dolly the country queen Parton, whose her ability to write songs has made her a myth, but in spite of their mythical there was one status in the music industry. Historical moment when the two musical giants nearly came into contact, but they didn't because of a significant strain. It all started with one famous song. Dolly's famous ballad Will Always Be a Part of My I Love You. Dolly penned this song in for her. 1973 was a very personal year regarding her choice to part ways with her longtime coach Porter Wagner and go solo profession, but it began as a sincere goodbye. It turned into one of the most beloved country tunes from the past, and Dolly put all of her energy into the lyrics. After being released as a single, the song swiftly gained popularity, earning her broad acknowledgement, but what she was unaware at the time that Elvis Presley's group was focused on the king himself also desired to cover it, and his group had already begun producing actions to bring it about. In the middle of the 1970s, Elvis was quite happy and had a repute for stealing from other artists' tunes and putting his own spin on them, so when he shown interest in I Will Always Love, it seems sense that Dolly was flattered by you. But there was a significant issue that you see Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis Presley's manager, having a track record of being demanding unbelievable discounts on tunes for Dolly, who was, and Elvis to record, just beginning to establish herself because a songwriter wasn't prepared to compromise. At the very least, Colonel Parker wanted to take Elvis 50% of the royalties from any song captured. And Dolly was the one that refused to acknowledge that it wasn't only about the respect for her work was more important than money. Dolly was aware of the importance of her work, and she wasn't prepared to allow someone to take profiting from it, therefore she turned Presley down. She informed his manager, "Is the copyright that matters most in my entire publishing house, and I am unable to." Dolly has frequently revealed that she was deeply offended by Elvis's bargain. Squad showed her, even though she admired him as a painter, therefore this transaction felt similar to a trap that was set purposefully taking advantage of her, and this made her feel awful. As Dolly subsequently disclosed that her refusal greatly displeased Elvis, she claimed that Elvis had adored the song, and she was determined to record it. Regretted him, but understood that if she gave in, it would establish a standard for other performers and supervisors to taking advantage of her. In the upcoming conflict between Dolly and Elvis wasn't merely a singer, he was intensely private. Even though she made an effort to being considerate of the circumstances that led to tension later on between them, and Dolly said that she didn't believe Elvis never quite forgiven her for refusing to. Dolly has stated in interviews that she was extremely heartbroken by the fallout since she greatly admired Elvis, as in she even mentioned that Elvis was an artist. Quite sensitive, and even though he didn't lash immediately outside, there was a discernible change between them after that. Ultimately, the choice of Dolly to cling to "I Will Love You Always" would turn out to be the finest one for her career in the end. The song was sung by Whitney Houston, and made it into among the success of the most popular songs ever. Houston's rendition elevated the song to a whole different generation, which made Dolly millions in royalties. However, even though there is conflict with Elvis, Dolly never felt remorse for her choice. She claimed to feel pleased about defending oneself, even at the expense of opposing one of the biggest celebrities. Although this isn't the only instance of her time, Dolly has defended her rights in the Howard Stern for someone in the face of tension as charming, modest, and scandal-free as it takes a lot to ruffle Dolly Parton. Her feathers, but one man in 2008 forced her to the brink, where the man was Howard Stern's bravado is well recognized. An unrepentant outlook on life, Howard drama is nothing new to Stern, and he is regarded as one of the finest, powerful and contentious radio historical figures on his show. The popularity of the Howard Stern show surged. In the 1980s and 1990s, Stern constructed his empire on stating what the majority of people wouldn't risk it for his followers, who he was. He was harsh and unafraid of his detractors, and frequently disrespectful. And in 2008, Dolly Parton was caught up in the middle of an highly contentious scandal. Stern's involvement in one of his biggest contentious passages that his team edited, combining passages from Dolly's audiobook My Life and additional unresolved matters into a fictitious interview that they utilized real Dolly voice recordings and put words and phrases together to give the impression that she was speaking some among the most egregious, bigoted, and repulsive. The portion makes it possible for Dolly seems to have disparaged other musicians, similar to Linda Ronstadt and Kenny Rogers. In addition to saying hurtful things about her personal life and body, it was intended to be humorous, but it's not at all that. Rather, it was rude, unappealing, and the crew of the deeply offensive Stern played it on television and chuckled since, to them, it was really an additional shocking portion, but for it was a moment for Dolly and her millions of fans. Full-on personality. Dolly is not known to get assassination easily enraged, but this time was unique. She made a rare and poignant public statement. Declaration that, "I have never been so startled, offended, and ashamed in all my I can't believe what Howard Stern said in life. What has happened to me in a billion years? Would never see such obscene stuff from my lips." She stated what Stern had committed was incredibly disgusting, and she even suggested filing a lawsuit against him. He was extremely large because Dolly rarely threatens the court, she said. "If a lawsuit was ever going to be filed, this is going to end. I want you to know that I am totally. This was heartbreaking." Fans were furious. Dolly has been a regular on